Hello and welcome back to Thirst Time. This is a special book review edition. It has been well over 6 months since I did one, but on my very first book edition I spoke about reviewing this book next. That's right, completely analog here. How We Used Saint Etienne to Live. This is a three-person band from the UK. Do I look good? Could I be a fourth? Who knows? Anywho's, I've just come back from holiday and it was another vain experience where I thought, I'll bring a book, I might read it. On this holiday, I actually got to read. I actually had rest. There were ups and downs with weather and wellness and ability to do physical things, and I got my chance. So I bought this. I'm a fan of Saint Etienne, and they are an English band that I think have been described most fittingly as perfect pop. They're very, very kitsch, very, very atmospheric, and they just keep on producing really quaint, cute things that I would say the best way to describe their sound is nostalgic, sometimes melancholic, but I would say mostly just nostalgic and dreamy. So, I bought this off their website. Every now and again I look on their website and they've obviously approved this book to be selling it on their website. I don't know, I don't think they commissioned this. My understanding is the guy that wrote this, Ramsey Al-Wakil, is from the UK as well, and he's a very big fan, but also a writer, and decided to write this book. And I think that the band members of Saint Etienne were very cool with the idea, embracing and open with the idea, and did some interviews with him, and he wrote his story.
So, here's the book review.
I loved the structure and the vision of this novel. I love the way it's chaptered. Chapter 1, do you remember how we used to live? Chapter 2, do you remember how we used to remember? Chapter 3, do you remember the way we live now? Chapter 4, do you remember where Saint Etienne used to live? Chapter 5, do I remember how Saint Etienne used to live? And Chapter 6, do you remember how Saint Etienne used Saint Etienne? My preferred part of the book is the intro. It looks at Saint Etienne in a way, you know, when you think, geez, that is so true, but I never thought of it like that. But actually it is like that. I just never had the click. Yes, it's kind of that part. Because Saint Etienne they're kind of they've done some video biographies, so to speak, not about them, but just about London. And they talk about, the old coffee shops that have closed, the way the city of London is changing. And it uses things that kind of sound old, and it kind of makes you, to be nostalgic is going to always be looking back to the past. So it's like these cozy moments of a past, but as the Ramsey mentions, it's not backwards. They are still a very forward-thinking band or group. And it was just so interesting. I didn't realize exactly how much they sampled and how their process of music creation was there. I mean, the book doesn't go into all of that, but the band members, Saint Etienne, they're really they catalogue music from different eras, and the two musicians behind it, not the vocalist Sarah Cracknell, but Bob Stanley and Pete Wiggs, they catalogue music. They do their own compilation releases of catalogue music from eras from the 60s to the 2000s, the noughties. These are guys that really love music, and when they started their artistic process, it was like, how do we make that sound? How do we recreate that sound? And as someone who is slowly dipping their toes into music production, the best way to start is to try and recreate your own sounds. That is a sort of style that doesn't really motivate me, so I haven't really done that, but it just goes to show that these are people that are so passionate about music, and they've just recreated sounds and then done their own twists and done very interesting combinations of what if we like this sound of this song and that sound of that song, and then what if we mix it together. That's really fascinating, and I think, wow, anyone can can make fantastic music out there if they just put in all the time and have all the passion. I can imagine these guys spend all their time talking about music, and that's what the kind of story goes on to talk about, how they felt about things. Where I feel the story kind of loses me a bit is where I think Ramsey really injects his own part into it, talking about like social housing, getting rather political about London. And I did a little quick look into him, and that's really his field and his specialty. But not to say that it's completely out of place. The band members do kind of give their opinions about, I think it's like the Thatcher era, and to things to do with housing, about Brexit, etc. So like what he's saying and what he's injecting into the commentary is not completely like taken out of context in any way, shape, or form. It's just that for me, as someone that has never lived in the UK anyway, I've watched my fair amount of Question Time to understand the mindset, how the general British attitude towards government and expectations of government is. But it's just has not at all been my experience with Saint Etienne, even though I did see the documentary about Finisterre. And I actually did really kind of find it interesting. It's just that the whole bit about social housing and politics took up the biggest, like it was the by far the largest chapter, and it was the least fun part of the book. So, interestingly, my story with Saint Etienne is very different from Ramsey's. Mine goes back a long way. Mine goes back over 25 years, or probably exactly 25 years. Probably like 1998, I think, was probably the year when I discovered Saint Etienne. It was the same year when Air became really famous, around the same time that Madonna released Ray of Light, and she was totally cool. Yeah, and I feel like Ramsey's story is different. But what is really cool is Ramsey talks about how everybody's story with Saint Etienne is different. How the band are kind of super obsessed with memory, and how our memories change, and how we remember our memories, and how that changes with time, and how things that are nostalgic and we harken back to a past is a distortion of the reality. All these sort of subjective perspectives is so true about Saint Etienne, and this is what is captured in the book. And this is, I'm like, couldn't want for a better book about Saint Etienne. It was definitely not a dry like history of their shit. It's literally like that plus a writer's spin on it. And this guy Ramsey has an excellent spin on time, memory, subjective reality, and I really loved hearing and relating to and seeing similarities with his Saint Etienne story. So I just feel like it's totally fitting that I do my Saint Etienne story. So, like how Ramsey notes, Saint Etienne started in music at a time where there was radio, a music industry that was completely like structured, and there were hits and non-hits and charts and CDs or cassettes or vinyl records. And that's how I began with music. I began with music when there were CDs out there. When I was old enough to go into the city after school with my best friend, and I'd want to look at the record store, and like I just had my teenage job and I just started getting money, and music was a real source of inspiration and like a gateway to the world that made me really dream of bigger and better things. And I was, discovering European techno, happy hardcore, Madonna Ray of Light. I used to listen to that every single night, just music in general. And I saw this really cool record cover that was like an animation, and it was called The Bad Photographer. And the band was called Saint Etienne. And I think being to France, and I was obsessed with anything that was French. And I'm like, well, I have to get it. Because I was just getting into the band Air, so I was like super in my French mode. And there we go. I got Saint Etienne, The Bad Photographer. I would describe it as folk music. Um, it's fucking amazing. Very kind of, it elicits a lot of emotion. And I'm not going to say I listened to it a lot, but I had some really fantastic B-sides on it. I really, really liked it, but I didn't become obsessed with Saint Etienne right on the spot. It was not the same style of music that I was listening to, but I really, really liked it. It was very kind of, had a 60s twist to it, but the structure of the music was extremely forward thinking. Flash forward, and that's really, really hard to do. Where was my next step with Saint Etienne? I probably, every now and again, because this, I'm talking before people had iPads, sorry, before people had iPods, before people were consuming music from the internet, it was all CDs. I would have my CD collection, and I would from time to time go back to that CD collection or make my own collection, and I just knew that I liked Saint Etienne. So naturally, I got curious about Saint Etienne. What was my next CD? I really don't know, but I feel like it would have been at least 10 years later, because I'd been 15, no, at least like 6 or 7 years later, I found myself in the centre of Australia. So I had, for example, moved to the biggest city, I'd moved to Melbourne, I had moved to Tokyo, I'd moved to the mountains in Japan, I'd moved back to Melbourne, and I'd moved to the desert of Australia, in the centre of Australia. And I found myself eventually, after a moment, in a situation where I had a lot of time on my own. And I discovered that eBay was a thing, and the internet, this I'm talking like 2007, the internet was kind of like a thing, and someone else had like things they could buy off eBay. I'm like, cool, like what's on eBay? And so you kind of look for, well, what do I want? Who do I want? And I thought of Saint Etienne, and they had an album which was, oh my god, Tales from Turnpike House. Extremely quaint with its whole theme, and it just completely uplifted me. It completely revitalized all of my cells, revitalized my brain. You know when music just like flushes all of the toxins out of your emotional and intellectual, to a degree spiritual system. It just flushes it out and brings in new life and energy, and you just feel invigorated. Like, I don't know how best to describe good music, but that's what I would describe it as. And there was that. I had Tales from Turnpike House. I then bought Foxbase Alpha. I would have then bought Good Humour, which was the album from which The Bad Photographer came, my first single. Yeah, I had those CDs at hand. I was really enjoying the music, along a lot of other things that were completely contemporary at the time, from the years of 2007 to, I guess, 2012. Then 2012 was a time when I moved back to Australia from France. I had a more of a disposable income, and I bought Finisterre. No. Before buying Finisterre in 2012, I went through a period around 2011 where I had a bit more of a disposable income, and I was still in Paris, but I was deciding to leave Paris, France. And looking on the internet, and I looked up Saint Etienne, and like they were releasing an album soon. This was Words and Music, and I really like how Ramsey talks about the significance of words and music, because words and music is like a collective, a catalogue of Saint Etienne. It's like it's like Saint Etienne having self-awareness is what, and doing exactly what they are. That is words and music. It's perfection. And Words and Music came out at such a huge time in my life. I suffering a very long, like a very serious breakup that really affected me, a burnout, an awakening, you could call it a spiritual awakening, and everything coming full circle. And this idea of Paris that I'd held for a very long time, that had come into a reality, and then after almost 5 years, deciding to leave. And then having my Paris experience coming full circle again and kind of falling in love again right before I decided to leave, and having this soundtrack which was words and music, and then going to Edinburgh University for a summer school with this brand new soundtrack in mind, being around amateur writers, being around Arthur's Seat, because I would go around it every day. Words and music is an amazing soundtrack for me. It really reminds me of that time. Then I came back home, I got into Finisterre. Alongside the way, there was a lot of other songs that I would like during Tales from Trading Park House, I discovered a B-side, which I don't know what CD it's on, but it's We're in the City. There was also The Method of Modern Love that I knew about as well and really loved. I don't know what CD that belongs on, and excellent remixes to it. That is a fantastic song. And then I just started collecting, other albums, So Tough, etc. Then there was the Home Counties CD that came out. Then I got into Sarah Cracknell's, which I love, her solo albums. There's apparently 3 out at the moment. I've got all 3. I just love her voice. Yeah, it all came full circle. And again, when they had their last album, I've Got Something to Tell You, that came at a really fantastic period of my life when I was really coming out of the lockdown. Fell in love again, still working for me today. And it was a really marking soundtrack for me, which talks about, I've Got Something to Tell You is very mature. For me, it's about maturity, vulnerability, necessities in life. That, it's about needs and those things that make us human, though, that make us different from any other form of life. Human desires and drives. That's what I'll say I've Got Something to Tell You is about. So Saint Etienne has always been perfect, and I've been collecting Pete Stanley and Bob Wiggs compilations, which I've been enjoying most of them. And I've even got a new Saint Etienne Deluxe Edition album CD on the way, which is Continental. I just discovered recently Stormtrooper in drag, and that's the amazing thing about Saint Etienne. For I guess it's the 10 plus years I've been collecting them, there's still golden nuggets out there for me to discover and build to my soundtrack of life. And they're kind of the only band I like. There's literally so many artists that I like. There's no artist that I've been liking for more than 5 years at the moment, except for Saint Etienne. They're completely a constant. So that's my Saint Etienne story. And I hope this video goes out to the other fans of Saint Etienne and anyone else who's on this channel that follows. Do have a listen. I will say, I guess, standout tracks for me are, and they're quite different from one another. While I love Stormtrooper in drag at the moment, I really love Heading to the Fair on Words and Music. I love Wood Cabin and Goodnight Jack from Good Humour. I love Hate Your Drug is it from Tiger Bay? Or So Tough. And obviously How We Used to Live, Paul Van Dyke edition, but a lot of people find that outdated. I love Red Setter on the deluxe edition of Sound of Water. So yeah, there's a few things. Have a listen. If you do watch this video and you do discover Saint Etienne, thanks to me, you're completely welcome. If you are a Saint Etienne fan, and I have met another one in my life, it was a guy from Newcastle while I was in Edinburgh, and it's like, oh my god, another Saint Etienne fan. We totally just love Saint Etienne. Either you know them and love them, or you don't know them. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I'd love to hear your Saint Etienne story, if you feel like sharing. Okay, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.